All right, this is round three grammar lesson. For anyone following, you'll see that this writing is much better than the last two. So the practice is paying off. I have the original three paragraphs here. I've highlighted them, and then I have the edited edition below. And so I'm going to go through paragraph by paragraph, just pick apart the sentences that have something to look at. And anyone that needs to slow down can pause it and take a look if they want to see a little more closely what's going on. So the first issue we have here, this is the first time I'm able to discuss a little bit about the passive voice. So if you look at this sentence here, we have the men, miners by trade, were inspired by the amazing clarity and depth of the majestic pool. So we're talking about the Crater Lake. The subject of this sentence, it's a little confusing if you're not paying attention. The subject is Crater Lake. Crater Lake is what's performing the action of inspiring. So the men are actually the object of this sentence. So the original, you need to have the were inspired, and this is the passive voice. The men, the men were inspired. So the edit here is we're adding were to make it the correct usage for the passive voice. The other option, although I think in this case passive voice works very well because you want to focus on the men, and so you put the men in the beginning of the sentence because you want readers to focus on the men having this inspiration with Crater Lake. Whereas if you do the opposite, if you use the active voice and you say Crater Lake inspired the men, the sentence doesn't really work the same. And so in this case, this is a really good example of why and when a reader or a writer might want to use the passive voice. So we got passive voice there. You can go back and look a little closer if you need to. The next issue we have is obviously they were miners, comma, not poets. So you need a comma after miners. This not poets is not essential information. I think we talked about this before. It's if you look up the comma rules, it's the parenthetical element. So it's not needed. It's not essential information. So whenever you throw in something that you don't need for the sentence, then that part should be used with commas. And we're going to have at least one more example of that here as well. So this is a example, just put a comma because you don't need that extra information. This was a really easy change. In your original here, you just use the present tense. So just keeping that verb consistency, you want to make it, yeah, it's right up here. You want it to be, because you're talking about Crater Lake in the past. And since you're talking about the changing of the name, that's happened in the past, so we should keep that as past tense. Here we have a comma, so you have your fanboy but. You have two sentences here. You have years later, the name was changed. That's a complete sentence. And then you have this next part, or a second sentence in here that was tossed out for its final name, and that's a complete sentence. It's a clause. So to combine the two, you need the comma after bad with the fanboy. So that one you probably know already, you just didn't catch it. This next sentence here, if you look up here at the highlighted one, you have some unnecessary commas. So our subject is Crater Lake. And so it should be Crater Lake is, you don't need a comma there. And you're giving two pieces of information. So in this case, if you look down here, we can just use that and. So Crater Lake is hollowed out and 50 miles northeast of Shady Cove. So you have two things there and you don't need the commas. You're just giving two bits of information about Crater Lake. So here's one. I really like this word choice, and I might talk a little bit more about this below, but dead set. So I think this really ties into at least one of the mysteries in the bigger story being told. So great word choice. If it was intentional, if it was unintentional, either consider taking advantage of a word like that or save it for later. And then, so this is that other piece of the parenthetical information that I was talking about. So you're combining two like sentence or two complete sentences. You have the comma, that's fine. You have the fanboy but, and then now this come winter. This part is not essential. So we need to add a comma there because we don't need that come winter part for the main idea, which is that the snow and the rain and the snowfall always and then seem. So when you have rain and snowfall, if you compare it back with the original sentence up to top, the rain and snowfall are two things. That's like so together they become plural. So you can think of it as being they. And so it should be they seem, not they seems. So you just want to use consistent verb tense there. So yeah, the seems, it should be seem, not seems. Rainfall and snowfall is a they, not a he or a she. Here we have another use of a comma that you don't need. So yeah, once again, you're giving two pieces of information about Crater Lake. So just take out that comma. You don't need that comma. And then also, I think just for clarity purposes, most readers will understand, but it's a little more clear that you're talking about the seventh deepest lake in the world versus I like I said, I doubt a lot of readers would think that you're talking about just the seventh lake of the world. That's but just to make sure, be a little more clear, I think it's better to add the deepest. And then once again, here as well, you have another usage. So you are using a comma. This is three times now you've used a comma when you don't need a comma for two items. You do need to use the commas if you have a series of items, but for just two items, the and is enough. You don't need the comma. So in this case, just drop that comma after site. So the spiritual site for, and then two pieces of information, worship and visual quest. Second paragraph is really straightforward. The biggest problem is you're not capitalizing your proper nouns, which is probably just because you're not paying attention. So that's something that you'd want to do on a final edit or revision. But for the most part, this paragraph is pretty straightforward. You just had a couple words here, but you can go back and look at those yourself. I don't think I need to explain any of those. So moving on, the third paragraph has one sentence that I want to break down a bit. So we have an introductory here at the moment. You should have a comma after at the moment. And then you have some information and you're kind of like setting up some contrasting information. So I think there's a couple ways to do this. You can be enjoying the carefree life of floating in a Tahiti, sucking down a few cold ones, comma, enjoying the hot summer afternoon. So I think you have a series of three things here, so you probably should put a comma after afternoon. And then one little mistake, period. So you have positive things, and now you're kind of contrasting and transitioning to negative things. Grammatically, this first part here that I'm going to highlight above, this is not a complete sentence, and it doesn't have parallel structure with the rest of your sentence. So the series should be enjoying, enjoying, and then enjoying. So and enjoying something else would be the parallel structure, but you're flipping that. So in that case, you would want to break off the afternoon. And then one little mistake. So one little mistake is a fragment. It doesn't have a subject or a verb. So you can either just add that information in and then, so now we have parenthetical element here that's not essential. And then one little mistake, comma, everything changes. I think this works just fine. The other thing you could do is maybe just start a new sentence here. So you're enjoying the carefree, you're sucking down a cold one, enjoying the hot summer afternoon, period. And and then you can maybe even just tie this in with the next sentence. Maybe you're tipped, or God forbid, fall out of the boat drunk, and bam. And so here's a really minor one. This one's not. So yeah, let me go ahead and check these ones off. So this reads as if it's a continuation of the previous sentence. So in that case, I think this is a very, very minor. I think you should not capitalize the UR because this bam and then you have this ellipses, the three dots. So that's I think the way you're using it, these two are very closely connected. So I think you can get it. I think you should not capitalize the U after the three dots. But this is a very, very minor thing that you probably don't need to worry too much about. And then there's just you have the wrong your. So you are Dunzo. Okay, I'm gonna stop this one. I'm gonna make another video because I would be interested in the people you shared this with, their response to what I'm gonna say about this in general, not looking at the grammar. All right, but yeah, to the person that wrote this, it's definitely getting better. Yeah, you maybe overcompensated by doing, you used to not use enough commas and now maybe you're using a little too many commas. That's a good progression. So you're almost there. All right, well, keep up the good work, and I'm gonna do one more of these.